This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hello and welcome to Evangelical. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. I hope everyone is doing well and staying safe and practicing social distancing and sheltering in place as much as possible as we all work to defeat this pandemic. Please stay safe wherever you are, and I hope that this show can be a relief or a comfort to you in some small way. My guests this week are Micah and Keylee Sudduth of the Backsliders podcast and YouTube series. In this conversation, I get to learn a little bit about both Keylee and Micah and how they met, as well as their backgrounds and what led them to developing this particular series and podcast. The series is a comedy series that is very funny on YouTube, and I really enjoyed it and just listened to the conversation to understand why. You can find their series over on YouTube by searching for Bob Billiams or Backsliders. Links for the show will be found in the show notes. This episode was produced and edited by Jake Lewis. Thank you very much, Jake. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at brchastain. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at xvangelicalpod. If you want to support the show, you can do that by rating and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, supporting it on Patreon at patreon.com/xvangelicalpod, or by subscribing to my newsletter, The Post-Evangelical Post, at postevangelicalpost.com. All right, let's get into it. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Evangelical. My guests this week are Micah Sudduth and Keylee Sudduth, both from the Backsliders web series and podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Blake.
Yeah. You nailed our names.
Yes, I always like being able to do that. Thank you for coming on the show. I had the pleasure of being on your show just recently, and I'm happy to have you on mine and learn a little bit more about both of your stories as well as that led to your development of Backsliders. Now, I do like to start the show by just learning more about the guest's background and especially their sort of religious background and where they initially grew up. So let's start with you, Keylee. Where did you first grow up, and what was your first exposure to religion like?
Yeah, I grew up in Texas, and when I was 4 years old, my parents divorced. But I think prior to that, and this is something I haven't really thought about until recently, we were a church-going family, like pretty regularly. My parents were Catholic at the time, but then after they divorced, my father became Lutheran again, if you can become Lutheran again.
Lutheran again.
And I lived with my mother, and I think when I was younger, we went to Mass more frequently. But then in junior high, I don't know if she just got tired of never having a day off because she also worked full time, or if she was just feeling like we should go to church less. We just started going to Mass pretty much on holidays only. And then I guess I don't really have memories as a child of being that into Catholic Mass. I kind of thought it was boring, like stand up, sit down. And I thought it was weird that I had to speak to a priest man and tell him what I felt bad about. But I remember, I was taught that was an important part of being Catholic, which was the right way to be. So I did it. I had my first communion and everything, so I had to go to classes for that, but never really felt that excited about what they were teaching and never really felt that connected to how they were talking about God. And then when I was 14 years old, I got invited by a friend to a mega church. It was an Assemblies of God church, but I think they also called themselves non-denominational. I'm not sure, but it was
Non-denominational was going around.
yeah.
Yeah.
The
They
hit
caught
phrase. And I was just kind of blown away by what was happening there. It was so cool. It was a whole production, a worship band, like lyrics on screens, people jumping up and down for Jesus, like this really cool hipster youth pastor talking about how, God is your dad and you can talk to him and like he wants to know you and love you, which really hit home for me because my parents had been divorced since I was very little, and I didn't have a great relationship with my father. And I had just never heard God talked about the way that they talked about it. And my friend was like on fire, and she kept inviting me back. And eventually I had, I answered an altar call and gave my heart to Jesus, which was weird for my mom because she thought by me being baptized as a baby in the Catholic Church that, Jesus was already in my heart. So what was I doing? But for me, it finally became like very personal and really in hindsight gave me what I was looking for, which was I was looking for community and structure and messages that resonated with me and gave me a sense of purpose and made me feel loved. My mom is also bipolar. So my childhood living with her and her being my only, day-to-day parent, it was kind of tumultuous because there were highs and lows and not a lot of stability. So I really found that in this megachurch, and I kind of devoted all of my free time to this community. And at first it was awesome. And I made a lot of new friends, and people believed in me and were encouraging me and telling me that I was a leader. Just, it kind of felt like, an extended family with a strong support and love that I was looking for. But unfortunately, I didn't realize it at the time, but the small group that I was a part of, there was a leader who was, at first he was just like this really awesome guy who was, praying for me and very encouraging of my faith. But I didn't know that he was essentially grooming me because he had a particular interest in me. And once I was 17, I entered into a relationship with him, but I didn't realize that I had been manipulated into that. Mm-hmm. And no one within the church talked with me about it and kind of looked out for me. And so I had a very weird, I was just in this really weird spot where I really loved God and cared about my spirituality, but I was also being pressured into this sexual relationship with this youth leader who was also feeling very shameful about what we were doing. So I became very disconnected and felt alone and also controlled, not only by this person, but this system that I didn't realize I was a part of, where I'd kind of given up my power and my autonomy. So I ended up ending this relationship and didn't really know what to do. I'd graduated early and was kind of lost. And I still felt like I needed to like find my way back into like a good standing with God. So I went to Christian university for my freshman year. And it was there where I really felt, sorry, we've got like a dog fight going on outside. It was at this Christian university where I think I was away from home and I was living in this very controlled environment that really paralleled how I think I was feeling in that relationship. And I just started asking questions. I was like, why am I letting myself be pressured into being different than who I really am? And I'm an artist and an actress, so I was in the theater program at this evangelical college, and what they were teaching as like what we were supposed to do as artists was basically like relay these cookie cutter stories and play these Disney characters, and there was certain work that was appropriate for us to perform and all this that were off limits. And I had always been attracted to stories that were messy and ugly and characters that were imperfect. So I think that kind of sterile environment when I was really needing to express my creativity made me start to like buck the system and question why I was participating in religion and an environment that was trying to put me and God and art in a box. And so I was kind of just like, fuck it, and started rebelling within this very Christian environment by like bringing in scenes into class from Spring Awakening, like a BDSM scene, and like really making professors uncomfortable. And then after that, I kind of swung the other way. I left that college and went to Texas State University, where I finished school. And I was an atheist and really learning, like, what do I believe, what's right and what's wrong, and how do you find that outside of religion? And now where I am today, like, we're living in LA, and through therapy and kind of coming back to my own sense of spirituality, I'm no longer an atheist, but I believe that we're all connected, and I believe we all have divinity within us, and that I don't necessarily think any religion can define it. And a lot of the times, at least in my personal life and for a lot of people that I know, religion has gotten in the way of people being themselves and feeling like they can be loved and accepted as they are. And that's, a very short version of this path that was not straight, that was all over the place.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I mean, there's so much happened to you in the space of those few years. And I'm sorry that church didn't have the safeguards in place to not have you experience those things. I mean, it's one of those things where trying to convey how you feel and how you feel sorry for someone, and like in it not being some sort of pandering way or insufficient. I'm sorry that
Right.
happened, and that is the sort of thing that can happen in those environments, and it's not right in any regard, because that person was supposed to be there to foster your spirituality, and they groomed you instead. Yeah. There's so much to your story besides that part. I want to return to how the arts played a part, because that's something that has been part of your life up until now and what you're doing. I think you used some really interesting words there in regards to saying that it was sort of sterile, and that the accepted sort of stories, whenever you were in those spaces, either in the youth group or that mega church, or in the subsequent Christian college experience that you had, were they always sort of trying to have you tell stories that could become like sort of Christian morality tales? Is that sort of the drive there?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think also what would happen is just archetypes, and certain archetypes that, you know, are appropriate for women to portray, and then those for men. And I think that what I experienced, like in the Christian environments that I was in, was that there was a right way to be a Christian girl or woman. And, there are all these warnings of what non-godly women were like. And so I think, in those environments, in terms of the stories that they were interested in us playing, it was like you were either leading people to God or, you're not. And that's the point of every story. But in reality, like, it's so weird to me now, because I look at the Bible and I'm like, there's so much fucked up shit going on in the Bible. So it's so ironic to me that it was these Christian environments that were trying to sterilize stories and say what was appropriate or what would be good for people to see or not.
Yeah. You mentioned that like your home life was unstable. Was that the main draw? Was that youth group culture in and of itself had an appeal of a lot of affection and a lot of stability? Was that the draw for you?
Yeah, I think stability and purpose were the draw. I had been like, since I was a little girl, since I was like 6, I had been involved in community theater and things like that, and I had found groups of friends there and some support and encouragement. And I had kind of stepped away from that in junior high because theater wasn't cool, and I had to be an athlete for a little bit to fit in. And so this, which did not work out because I'm really not that coordinated.
She's not.
Even though there are a lot of athletes in my family, I was always the artistic one. And it was for a reason. It was because I loved it, and it was also because I'm not very good at coordination. But I was coming out of that. I was 14, starting high school, and I think I was just kind of lost. And that megachurch community gave me encouragement to pursue what I loved. Like, I joined the production team in the church. I was on the worship team, and I kind of was like remembering, oh, I love art. I love expressing myself this way. And I loved the validation that God had given me these gifts. It was the fine print that, I get right away that eventually really bothered me and made me feel confined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's...
Did I answer your question?
No, that was great. Yeah, and I think I think what you said there near the end about it being fine print, that is so very true. And like, it's all those sorts of things that are going on just beneath that you're not necessarily aware of, especially when you're that young, and it's almost, it's not right that you would expect someone that young to be that sort of aware of all those different dynamics.
You're so impressionable.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Keylee, for sharing that. We'll come back, and I also want to hear about how you two eventually met. But Micah, what's your initial origin story, and how your initial religious life or family life that played a role in your youth?
Yeah, I've been unpacking it for a while, and I feel like the older I get, the more and more questions I have for where I came from and what shaped me, because it wasn't a typical denomination of a Christian church that many people would know about. My parents met in a ministry or a movement or a institution, research center, whatever they wanted to call it in the 70s, called The Way. My mom was in a touring band that was called The Joyful Noise, and my dad was the assistant for the leader of this movement named Victor Paul Worrell. And it was a charismatic movement. They felt like they had the corner on the market of the biblical translations. I would say that was their claim, is that, even the King James Version, which they swore by, had its flaws, and I'm sure it does. But that's how they sold people on, you need to learn what we know about the Greek and Hebrew. It led them to not believe in the Trinity, which is kind of a mainstay in Christian religion.
Yeah, historically. Yeah, it has been.
Yeah, so I was raised to not believe in the Trinity. I was raised to not believe in the cross, that it was a tree, a straight up and down tree. And this was very important that I knew this.
It's the details. It's all the details.
It was important that I knew there were 4 men on the side of him as opposed to 2 that we usually see in the paintings. It was important that I knew that David and Goliath, that David hit him in the shin with a rock, not the forehead. And it was very important to them that I knew all sorts of contrary stories from the Bible that nobody that I knew could understand or relate to. But growing up in that environment, that's just what I was learning. And I guess I got to go back a little bit. My parents eventually did leave that ministry because it kind of fell apart. The leader was exposed as a sexual predator, and other leaders were exposed as sexual predators. I was named after one of them. My middle name, luckily, I don't have to go by the first name of sexual predator. And my parents started their own home church, and it was essentially the same thing, except without the predatorial nature, because there was a lot of people, there was a lot of splinter churches from this ministry. They just like scattered, and then they found each other because they were like, we met here. This meant a lot to us. It was like Christian Woodstock. Right. They had a big concert every year called the Rock of Ages, and it was life-changing for all of them. Like, I still know many of these people. They're my second moms and my mom's best friends, and people that mean a lot to me that came out of this movement that look back on it very fondly, even though they know that it was kind of a mastermind of, somebody who was either ill intent from the beginning or corrupted to an extreme degree. And I think a lot of them would probably go with the latter, just because the first one would really shake their ability to discern anything in life. Yeah. I think they would rather the idea that, he was a big target for the devil and the devil got him. The devil just got him, as opposed to like he was this very manipulative monster that manipulated them from the beginning and used the Bible to do it.
Yeah.
So
you guys had really, really chill experiences with religion early in life. That's
super chill, super chill.
Relaxing.
So yeah, my parents started their own church kind of based on that similar model. And my mom was also undiagnosed bipolar until I was 25, before she found out. She was always diagnosed as having, depression and whatnot, but it was the other swing that was kind of more difficult to handle. But, it shapes us.
And you were homeschooled?
I was homeschooled. Of course I was homeschooled. My dad, stockpiled ammunition and had his get out of town bag, kind of ready to go. We moved to the woods when I was like 12 years old. Whether that was religiously motivated or not, my dad definitely wanted to get away from the city. And, I can't blame him. Now I have those desires myself to like, oh, maybe the city isn't as awesome as I thought it was.
Yeah.
But, I think that it took me years to kind of be able to dig questions out of my parents to kind of find out really what shaped them, to figure out, oh, that shaped me too. Right. So like, I feel like they were in this wake of this very traumatic experience, and they didn't necessarily deal with it, but they kind of passed it along, and they kind of tried to polish it up and put a different brand on it and do the same thing, but it was still created by somebody that probably needed to be burned to the ground. But maybe my opinion is that all of these organized kind of man influenced, which they all have to be, because who else is influencing them?
Right.
Kind of have to be burned down every once in a while in order to be refined.
Yeah. Did you?
But were you always believing that? Or as a kid, were you questioning what they were teaching you?
Yes and no. So my parents were definitely speaking in tongues, interpreting. You could possess all the gifts, the spiritual gifts, and should, you should strive. So, in church, my parents would call on people to speak in tongues and prophesy, or just prophesy, or speak in tongues and interpret, and that kind of thing. I was never comfortable with that. I was never comfortable with people doing it, and I was definitely not comfortable being asked to do it. And I think that caused a little bit of a rift between my dad and I, because I think he kind of needed me to be that show pony a little bit. And because I was even at a very, there's no reason a 7-year-old should resist this, but I most definitely did, and I didn't drop it.
Right.
It caused him to maybe just not treat. I wouldn't say he didn't treat me well, because he did, but I think that I felt it, whether it was there or not, that he was just like, what an idiot. But I felt the same about him in that arena. I was like, no, you're an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's relatable just as like a father-son sort of dynamic, but also
yeah, sure.
No, but even so, like whenever like there's that added pressure if you're like a PK and you're supposed to model something for other people in like in a faith community, that's extra pressure. That's not just like dads and sons going at it. That's an extra added element.
Yeah, and I was so allergic to this prescription relationship with what was supposed to be such an individual, or how I understood it. I think I had a pretty clear understanding of what a relationship with God was supposed to be, but none of these prescriptions were a part of that for me. And I didn't think they needed to be prescribed to anybody else either.
That's interesting. And that was your opinion, like early on, like that you saw these people acting a certain way and it just didn't make sense to you, even as a kid, that you don't necessarily need to relate to God in this sort of way.
Right. Because it felt more, I felt like I felt like I had a very good sense of like people being sincere, or people feeling pressured to do something, or to want to feel the way that the leader was telling them they could feel. Mm-hmm. So it was almost as if they had to, it was like fake it till you make it,
Right.
Dress the part. And I've always been allergic to that. And I think it's because I saw the two sides of my parents. My parents would fight like cats and dogs. And I think it's because they both had traumatic lives and weren't fully able to deal with them individually. And then how would they have a successful coupling? It's just very challenging to do that, even as healthy individuals. Mm-hmm. So as they would, screaming at each other on the way to church, and my mom would threaten to jump out of a moving car and say, I'm not going to walk into that church and put a smile on my face today. And we would get there and we'd open the door and she would put a smile on every single time. Mm-hmm. So I knew that there was bullshit all around me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just my parents.
Yeah. There's something about, I think, being like a PK that your BS detector is very finely tuned.
Oh, so much.
Because of that, because you see it, because those leaders, they expect themselves to act like that, and then you see like sort of 360 degrees in a lot of ways when other people don't. I'm married to a PK, so
Say that again?
it's
Oh, nice. Yeah.
so
Yeah, you get it.
I get it.
It's interesting because you see like the superstar young associate pastors that are doing everything like a main pastor would want them to do. And to me, those people are like the most unbearable people for me to be around, because it's like you were literally just doing what you think you're supposed to do, and what my opinion is what's healthiest for you to do is to just be you, not be this polished version of yourself that you think presents well and is a better example, doesn't have vulnerabilities, or even if they do have vulnerabilities that they share, they even sound fake and rehearsed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think so many people that have been in church environments can relate to that, just the performative nature of it. So, and exactly what you said, like being faux vulnerable instead of actually vulnerable. It happens far more often than people like to admit. Given that you sort of saw this sort of performance that you didn't really like, you saw these types of things modeled, people acting in sort of a deceptive way. What sort of drew you to wanting to do something creative, or drew you to acting or any other sort of creative pursuit?
Man, I don't exactly know if I know that answer right now. I know that my mom went out of her way to expose me to a lot of different activities, and one of them was a movie came into town when I was a kid, and we were extras in the movie.
Oh wow!
And when I was on set for this movie, I just knew, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. This is this is it. This is what I'm gonna do. And loved playing characters that weren't myself. Which is so weird, because I think in that environment, like I knew I could pretend, but in my real life, I did not want to pretend because I wanted to just be me. I so desperately just wanted to be me. But on stage, it was an appropriate place to pretend to be someone happier, someone angrier, someone eviler, someone better. I could be all the things that I saw other people maybe being in their everyday life, but this place was like I was allowed to do it, which is weird. Is I loved characters far from myself, and I still do. But now I'm kind of obsessed with trying to be myself on screen, almost not more than I am in real life, but I want to expose myself on screen in ways that make me uncomfortable to do publicly.
Yeah, that's laudable, because that's not the easiest thing to do, and to get to a place where you're comfortable being yourself in public.
Yeah,
because so much of life is trying to gauge how much you should reveal yourself. So for that to be where you're going now is really fascinating.
It's just, I think I've kind of hijacked my passion and turned it into my personal therapy.
You know what? I think that can work. If you can make it work, then that's good. So how did you two end up meeting? How did your paths cross?
We actually met in a play in Austin. So the secular college that I went to after the Christian college was Texas State, which Micah happened to be an alumni of. And he was living in Austin at the time. And I would occasionally do a play in Austin over the summer. So I auditioned and he was cast in the play, and it was a very small cast. There were 4 people total, 2 characters who were like in their 40s and 2 characters in their 20s. And we met and, spent a lot of time together in rehearsal and really got to know each other and kind of became best friends pretty quickly. Had a lot in common, obviously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some religious background and still spiritually curious people who wanted to tell stories. And very early on in our relationship, we talked about making things together.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty cool that we actually followed through with it.
Totally.
Good job.
Our first project that we developed and have yet to make was called Meat and Carrot. Just a little idea about a girl named Carrot and a boy named Meat. You can see why we haven't made it yet.
There's something there, though.
Those opposites attract,
Yeah. And now you have a production company, and you have a new series as well as a related podcast called Backsliders. You have a couple of shorts up. I don't know if I'm using the right term there, but you've got a couple,
like it.
Yeah, a couple of episodes up on YouTube, and they're very funny. The first one that there's a trailer and then there's 2 full episodes, and the first one is I believe called Panic Breath. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
And it just opens with you, Micah, just laying in bed, sort of taking in really deep breaths and holding them. And Keylee walking in saying, "Oh, are you thinking about death again?" And it goes from there. But what I really loved about it was that it gave me this sort of sense of, I'm going to make a really nerdy analogy, and I don't know if you guys are into comics or the Marvel movies, but basically,
Do it.
So basically, when like the most recent Spider-Man movies came out, they like skipped over the entire origin, because of the fact that there had already been 5 Spider-Man movies in the last like 12 years. So like when Tom Holland came on and was in Homecoming, was the name of that one, Spider-Man Homecoming. When they just glossed over it and they were just like, who Spider-Man is, you don't need to know this. Like coming to that episode, like Keylee, you have a couple lines of like, oh, we used to believe this stuff. But, and then it's just sort of like in the background, and it felt like very relatable, just in that there are plenty of people that have the sorts of experiences that you've had, that I talk about to people on this show, of moving away from some sort of religion, and changing your mind, but like all of that was sort of in the background, and then the rest was just hilarious, just because it was there, like on the subtext sort of, and I really appreciated that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That really means a lot to hear. So in 2013, we started making things together, and that was the year we also got married. So at first, we were just making shorts that were based on conversations that we had in our first year. That series is still on YouTube. It's called Talk. And over the last, it's 20 years, we've been making projects and getting more and more honest with our work. And I think that's a reflection of us getting more and more honest with each other. Because even though when we met, we had left our religious environments behind, some of that indoctrination of presentation and the conditions of love still existed in the underbelly of our relationship, especially for me, because I walked in with a lot of just a lot of work that I hadn't done on myself. I hadn't gone through therapy. I hadn't started to navigate the shame that I felt about myself, that I still felt towards my sexuality and sexuality in general. And so it took a while for me to feel completely comfortable with Micah, even though we were married. So in our work, you can kind of see us get more and more honest. We made another series called Home that we filmed in 2016. That was about us trying to find a sense of belonging here in LA. And now our project is called Backsliders, and we're finally kind of showing this thing that we haven't ever really been that forward with in our work, which is the weird religious shit that we're still working through. And it's always there lingering. And it's been really very fun for us to make, because it's been therapeutic to share with people. And even if they didn't happen to grow up Christian, for them to relate with this thing that we all do as humans, which is put certain masks on with certain people. And it's been really fun for us to reveal even more of ourselves unmasked and have that resonate with people, and also laugh about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the title of it came from pretty much the fear that we had of what people would think about us.
Right.
That we've carried for years. You know, I can't be this person that wants to be real and authentic and then not about the things that I'm super afraid to reveal about myself. So then it's just like, well, we might as well just call ourselves the thing we're worried about people calling us, if we're honest.
Right. Yeah.
So we did.
Yeah.
And it's been pretty freeing.
Yeah, that's great.
And the response has been surprisingly fine, I will say.
Yeah. It's just funny how, like, the fear of what other people think, I know everybody deals with that, but there's especially like this fear of what Christians will think. You know, people that I was really close with when I was at the mega church. I don't talk to all but like one of them. She's my best friend. But why am I wondering what these people might think if they watch my YouTube video and think that I'm going to go to hell now or whatever? It's just weird how the fear of being judged through Christian eyes is still a part of my thought process, even though I'm so far away from it.
It sounds like a band name, Christian Eyes.
Christian eyes.
That or one of those browser extensions that, like...
Oh.
That's true.
I bet there is.
Did you get your full analogy of the comic book out?
Yeah.
Did we cut you off before
No,
that stuff?
no, not at all. You totally let me ramble on more than enough to get that point across.
No, well, I mean, I don't mind being compared to a Marvel.
But yeah, I mean,
gotten that feedback before.
Sorry.
In a different way. We've kind of gotten feedback similar to that in a different way, not like the Marvel way, but Micah and I were actors first, and we're writers and directors second. So we're not making things that are like action movies filled with a lot of big plot points. It's relationship based. It's very dialogue based, because we film a lot in our home too. So it's really convenient, but also that's what we're fascinated with, is what's going on in the room between two people who are really being present with each other. Mm-hmm. So I think that we do just drop people into our relationship and let them see what it's like in our house through conversations that we really have and things that we really do around each other. So it's nice that that's enjoyable and that you just feel like you're in the room with us and are kind of a fly on the wall of mm-hmm. what's actually going on.
I think it's also this practice of also desperately not to be that couple at 60 that's like, I don't even know the person I'm with, or I've been hiding myself. I've not revealed my true self to this person that I've been married to for 30 years. And I feel like there is something from previous generations that they're like, that's just the way it is. You can't just say the truth. Like, how embarrassing. We're like, we want to do the embarrassing thing that leads to the better relationship and maybe a more developed self.
Yeah. And that's great. And you can tell from your on-screen presence that the two of you are very comfortable with each other. In the second episode where you're sort of doing this body dance thing, it's very, very funny. I was laughing just all by myself, just watching it. Just because...
We appreciate that. Well, we were very insecure about that episode.
To me, like whenever something can make you laugh out loud when you're alone, that means it's hilarious. and so,
oh, wow, thank you.
What you're making and what you're putting out in this context, even with like the name Backsliders, I think the people that come from that background will get it like immediately. It'll click, and it'll be enough for them to say, or to know that this is sort of what's going on with these characters or what they've been through, without even having to acknowledge it, which is really cool. You've also submitted this to Tribeca, and it's been accepted. Given that we're all sort of stuck in our houses, what is that process going to be like for the festival and for its submission there and everything?
Well, obviously, the in-person festival has been postponed, understandably, because of COVID-19. So if that had happened, we would have on 420 been screening 3 unreleased episodes of Backsliders at the festival. And what they're doing for us now is there's going to be an online, what they're calling a creators market that's sponsored by HBO, where we're going to be doing a series of Skype interviews with people who have watched our materials and are interested in the work that we do and the conversations we're trying to have. And even if nothing physically comes from that, it's kind of a cool opportunity for us to have general meetings with executives as creative people. Those people are nice to know, we have heard.
Develop some relationships.
Yeah. Nice.
So, and then after that, they'll be hosting those 3 episodes at some point on their website, which is just such an honor for us because we're independent filmmakers. We do this because we love it. We put our day job money into it. As I'm sure you know, it's like it's something that you do because you have to. It's a real passion, and we're thrilled that it's been accepted into a place that has a good reputation and that we have an opportunity to show what we're excited about to more eyeballs that maybe wouldn't find it organically.
Totally. And we've got more episodes coming everybody's way. We've got 13 episodes in total, so they'll be dropping
awesome.
as we speak. There's probably another one coming out this week, and
cool.
We're developing a half-hour show. So we're actually hoping that this becomes something bigger.
Yeah. That's another cool thing that Tribeca is doing by setting us up with these meetings is that, so our vision with this show, we want to work in TV. Like HBO is our dream network. So it's cool that we're getting to be a part of an event that's sponsored by them. But we have a vision for a half-hour show that's set in Texas, in rural Texas, where we grew up, where versions of our characters have to go back home and kind of get re-involved in the faith community that they come from while their beliefs have changed. So that's like the vision for the big show. And we also have a podcast, which you were on, which we originally wanted to do to have more conversations like this because they were kind of rare, but the most exciting thing to us. So the podcast is called Backsliders. We have conversations with people from all backgrounds about what they were raised to believe and where they are today. And that has made us feel less alone. Yeah. Also realize how many people are talking about this. And it's great research for the show.
Yeah, totally.
So it all kind of blends together.
Yeah, that's great. It's always great to make something and then sort of see it resonate in the world, and then have that opportunity to keep having conversations or make the things that you want to do. So that's so cool that you guys have this opportunity with Tribeca as well as through your podcast to keep making the sorts of there's the word content it's not a great word, but like, you know what? It's like the most fitting, and given the world we live in now, video content and audio content.
It's all encompassing.
Yeah.
It just means people making things.
Yeah.
So
we got tired of the term web series, that we wouldn't call our shows a web series. We called them digital series.
Digital series.
It just sounded
nice.
Premium digital series is how we rebranded web series.
Well, it's just interesting, because we're filmmakers, so we do put a lot of like care into what we do. So it did kind of feel like, I don't want to diminish it by calling it a web series, but really, yeah, we're putting it on the web, and it's a series, so that's what it is. But
yeah. Sometimes words, blog is terrible. But we all use it.
Yeah.
We all use that word now. Everybody gave in to selfie. All these words, they just blend in eventually.
Picture of myself.
To us, and I think maybe you can relate, stories really are so healing, and there's this quote that I love, that stories are medicine. And it's from this awesome book, Women Who Run with the Wolves, by Clarissa Stola Pinke. I don't quite know how to say her name, but that's why we do the work that we do. That's why we have this podcast now. And that's why people like you, who have a podcast where you interview so many people, and we get to hear their stories of how they grew up and how they processed their environments and asked questions and how that led to where they are today. We always learn and grow and feel less alone when you hear other people share their authentic story, even if it's totally different from yours. So thanks for the work that you do as well. We were so happy to have found you.
Oh, thank you. I'm flattered. I really appreciate that. I'm really glad when I'm able to meet other people that are doing this sort of work. And I always think it's great when people are able to incorporate humor and other elements into this type of work, because a lot of times I feel like we can, and I'm speaking certainly of myself and some of the conversations that I can tend to have, they can tend to be heavy. But like with the first couple episodes of Backsliders that are available right now as we're recording, there's another element to it, of course, which is that there's light on the other side too. So it's not like all of the things that the two of you have been talking about, of being your natural self, being comfortable with yourself. Like, all of those things are so valuable, and things that we weren't necessarily taught or weren't modeled for us, but we've had to find, just like so many other people before us too. It's not that like, people our age are geniuses that are discovering self-discovery, but but us doing that work, like, it's still the work that needs to be done, and it's so great that there's shows like yours that are doing that from a perspective of just being like comfortable in front of a camera and a little goofy and vulnerable. Like, all of that is great, and I'm really excited to see where this show goes next, because it's a great thing to be out there.
Man,
thank you so much. It feels so good, because it takes a long time to actually make something, and as I'm sure like this project itself, we've been technically working on for 2 years, but it's based on our lives, so a little longer than that. And it's nice to put it out there and hear, even if it was one person who's like, oh, that's kind of funny, it would still feel good, because it's finished, and to be able to share it and talk about it.
Yeah.
It's funny, because you are our target audience. And somebody told me the other day, it's like, this is Christian comedy, but it's not necessarily going to be popular in the Christian community.
Right.
Or maybe it would be. Or maybe it would be if people can laugh at themselves. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're kind of, we're like, I don't know what would make it Christian comedy.
Well, I think we think Christian means pro-Christian, but Christian just means, to me, Christian just means the topic is Christianity.
Or like these characters are culturally Christian.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, so many, like within evangelicalism, it's either you're in or you're out sort of thing. But I mean, Christianity is a global religion, right? And so like people who are Christian can comment on it. People who aren't Christians can comment on it. People who used to be can comment on it. And like, yeah, it's all fair game. And that's the whole point of comedy. The whole point of comedy is to take away that mask, but to do it in a way that disarms someone instead of making them upset. So, I mean, I'm not a comedian, but I deeply respect people that can do it and do it well. So it's very, very cool to see this project and see where it heads from here. Because I mean, it's a quarter of the U.S. population, right? Like a quarter of the U.S. population is evangelical, and then what percentage used to be? So
right, yeah. Like the largest growing religion in America is the unaffiliated.
Right.
So that we're out there, like we're all out there. I get
looking for content.
I get excited every time I meet someone who's interested in any of this because I'm like, oh yes, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can feel that way. Just we're in LA where not everyone has these backgrounds or these hang-ups or is like,
and this town isn't necessarily jumping at the opportunity to have these conversations,
to talk about religion. Honestly,
it happens. There's a couple shows out there that we've enjoyed a lot.
And I think maybe I was just thinking about this as you were talking. It kind of hit me. Another thing that Micah and I have in common, obviously, is one of our parents was mentally ill, and we were in an environment as kids that sometimes felt pretty chaotic. And I think we both tended to, as a coping mechanism, turn to arts and also to make light of it and to laugh, because like if your childhood is traumatic and chaotic a lot of the time, and you don't find a way to cope with it, it can be very challenging. And for us, it was expressing ourselves through acting and through making, I have 3 siblings. I was trying to make my siblings laugh or like, distract from things that didn't feel so good. And sometimes it just feels good to laugh at how weird life and your family and what you were taught to believe is. It just feels good.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of that first episode, right? It feels good to laugh.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm so glad I was able to talk to both of you and get just a small sense of your background, as well as this project that you've worked on and that you've put out into the world, and you have this opportunity to showcase at Tribeca. Where can people find it? Where can they find the podcast and any other sorts of places that you'd like me to point people to?
Yeah. So we have a YouTube channel. You can find us at youtube.com/Bob Billiams Productions. It's Bob and then Billiams, like Williams, but with a B, because we thought it was funny, and it's always a little annoying to explain. But I promise we're the only one. If you search Bob Billiams Productions, you can also search Backsliders series or Backsliders podcast on YouTube, because we put our podcast interviews on YouTube as well. You can search Backsliders on any podcast platform. We're also on Instagram at the Bob Billiams, and our production company website is bobbilliams.com. That's a lot.
It's a lot of places to go.
But
that's great.
You search Bob Billiams, we'll be the only Bob Billiams.
We are the only one.
Well, Micah, Keylee, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. We really appreciate it.